Hey everybody, it's Daniel with Hyperacusis Hope, and today I wanted to make a video about putting yourself first. This condition is one that a lot of people do not understand. How can we essentially advocate for ourselves in our day-to-day lives? It's difficult to live with somebody if you have hyperacusis. Dishes clanking, just somebody setting a glass down on a table while you're trying to talk to them. People, vacuuming, it's just endless. There's certain things we can't control, Neighbors are gonna mow their lawns. They might mow their lawns a lot. They might mow their lawns like they're insanely obsessed with it. Can't do anything about that. But what we can do something about? Telling people, hey, I'm sorry, but my hearing is extremely sensitive. And I'd really appreciate it if you could speak a little bit quieter. My ears are just being really dramatic. Make it light, but make it direct. We don't have to set ourselves on fire to keep others warm, We can advocate for ourselves. Like the person that I stay with, when I go downstairs to talk with them, it's a little awkward, but I'll literally just text them beforehand, hey, is everything all clear? It's taken a little while, but we've kind of gotten into our little flow. And we'll be talking downstairs and then the refrigerator will turn on and I'll be like, hey, let's move over here into the living room to get away from the fridge. Or I'll just say hey, could you turn that fan off? I'd love to hear what you're saying, but, that's going to make my ears, hurt and, fatigued, and so you kind of have to get comfortable, just kind of moving around, sometimes straight up running away. If there's something the guy from the basement comes up, even if I'm in the middle of the conversation, she knows I'm going to run away. I've heard so many stories of people who felt obligated, because of some sort of, event they were at or, just some sort of, situation they were in that was bothering their ears, but socially they just felt weird about just kind of running away. You got to learn to run away. It takes practice, we're wired to want to be accepted by others. But the fact is we have to put ourselves first. I do think there's a balance that has to be struck. I think sometimes we do have to let small things go. And you know what? You can't please everyone. And the more you kind of make it about you, the lighter you make it, the less defensive people will be. But there are some people that don't care, and that's very sad and unfortunate. And I'm going to say whenever possible to avoid those people. To certainly not try to chase their understanding and accommodation. I know not everybody is fortunate enough to live with somebody who's understanding. Do not allow yourself to be guilted. Do not allow yourself to be gaslit. Easier said than done. But if you need to wear protection, if you need to stay to yourself, do that, because, you have one life, you got one set of ears. And finally, I just want to kind of talk about dealing with medical professionals. If somebody wants to give you a hearing test and you're not comfortable with it, some of us maybe for our records want, hyperacusis diagnosis, although ENTs and audiologists tend to not know a lot about this condition. So if that makes you uncomfortable, don't do it. Don't let somebody in a position of so-called authority, dictate to you what you're supposed to do. If you're in a situation where, you're at a job or, you got to get something done at I get food stamps. I had to go down to the office once and I was like, hey, I need to go to a quieter area. I cannot take my earplugs out otherwise, and I can't speak with them in. I was literally writing this stuff down on a piece of paper for them. Sometimes I use my phone notepad. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable and just being your own number one. Nobody's gonna come rescue us. Nobody's gonna come save us. We gotta advocate. And finally, do not beat yourself up sometimes, I'm not perfect about this. There are times where I'm like, this conversation with this person is going to be very short, so I'm not going to worry about like telling them to be quiet. And then, I have a little bit of a setback. And I'm just like, I really just should have said something, or I just like should have cut the conversation short or whatever. Like, go easy on yourself. I always say the only person you gotta compete with is yourself. So, just try to show up for yourself a little bit more each day. This is Daniel with Hyperacusis. Hope. Peace out.